kitchen is filling up with food. There's music in the hallway, everybody's in the mood. Oh, ring, ring, doorbell ring. It's house party time.
House party time.
House party.
Hi, this is Michael Azarad, Editor-in-Chief of The Talkhouse, and welcome to the Talkhouse Music Podcast. This episode of the Talkhouse Music Podcast might feature two major players in the field of children's music, Dan Zanes and Sesame Street musical director Bill Sherman. But as you'll soon see, the conversation ranges much farther afield than just music for kids. Like, why and how do you make music at all? As the leader of the Grammy-winning Dan Zanes and Friends, Dan Zanes has been one of the most popular names in music for children for the past 15 years. He's made over a dozen popular and acclaimed albums for kids and played concerts all over the world. Bill Sherman's work on the Broadway production of In the Heights won him a 2008 Tony Award for Best Orchestrations, and he is a songwriter and orchestrator who's responsible for the music you hear on Sesame Street. He works with the many musicians who drop in and sing songs on the show, Janelle Monae, Ed Sheeran, Will-I-Am, and many others, and is one of the driving forces behind such musical opuses as Guacamole the Musical, Glory of Cookies, and Grover Can Do It All. In the mid to late 80s, Zanes led the scrappy and beloved New England's roots rock band the Del Fuegos. Zanes talks about how we went from playing in a rock band that had a good time all the time to making wholesome music for kids, and how it helped him rediscover what he loved about making music in the first place. Sherman discusses how Sesame Street music is made, with a lot of care for one thing, and what it's like to work with the many stars who drop by the show, and lots of other stuff you've probably wondered about music at Sesame Street. What is the key to writing for kids? Zanes and Sherman do explore that, but they talk about a whole lot of other stuff, like life stuff. The conversation is perhaps a little saltier than one might expect, so cover your kids' ears.
House party time.
House party time.
Whoa, block party time.
I studied the saxophone in high school. I wanted to be a jazz musician, which at the time both my parents were doctors, so they thought that was a fantastic idea for making money. And so I was really into it, and I went to college to Wesleyan University to study music, to study jazz saxophone. And after a couple of years, I kind of just had this realization that I wasn't as good. Like, I had good ideas, but I wasn't as good, and I didn't want to take the time to be as good as the great dudes. So I got into West African music, and I went to Ghana my junior year of college to study West African drumming, because that sounded like the right idea at the time. And in retrospect,
Makes sense.
It was super fucking fun, so I'm
I
glad I
bet.
did that. And then my senior year of college, I met this guy, Lynn Miranda, at Wesleyan, and we worked on his music theater shows. And I never was a big music theater fan. I never went to that many shows. I grew up on Long Island, and my parents brought me in to see shows from time to time, but it wasn't really like my thing. But I did it because it sounded like fun. And then I graduated from college, and I moved to Manhattan, and I worked at MTV in the IT department, and I sat in the copy room, and I was pretty pathetic at that time. And then all the while we were working on the show called In the Heights. And In the Heights, took like 8 years to make, and we made it into this Broadway show. And then from there, I somehow convinced... Oh, at the same time, I play in this group called Freestyle Love Supreme, which is like a hip-hop improv comedy troupe. And the woman who became the executive producer of the Electric Company, she came and liked Freestyle Love Supreme, so sort of based her whole show, or that kind of loosely on this group that I played in. And so I weaseled my way into being the music director of the Electric Company, and we made like 60 episodes in a year and a half, which was a lot. And then I somehow, and then at the same time, Sesame Street was doing this overhaul of their music department. The guy I replaced had been there since 1969, which was pretty epic. So anyway, I got into that.
What is a music director?
Well, it's interesting.
What are you
Dan,
doing?
Every day I wake up, I
What do
wonder
you
the same
do,
question.
man?
It's interesting. Music direction is so different from media to media. Like in the theater world, a music director is like conducts or teaches all the vocals, gets all the music together, and then more often than not is the conductor in the pit, conducting the band and playing and whatever, and making sure everything's cool with the show itself. A music director on television is sort of like an all-encompassing music supervisor position for me, for example, the Sesame Street, it's like I get the scripts, I figure out what the vibe of the tune is. I either write the tune myself or I send it to somebody to write. I get it back. I get it approved by the production. I arrange, I orchestrate, I record it with the band. Sesame Street has like this 8-piece band that records all the music. And then I get all that done, and then we underscore all the music once the episode has been made. So it's like a sort of all-encompassing thing. And then music, there's no real music directors on movies, for example, unless there's a musical part of the movie. That's more of like a music supervisor that finds the tunes and licenses the tunes and all this other shit.
So if you get the script and you need to write a song, how long do you have to write it?
It depends. Sometimes the way we work with Sesame Street, for example, it's like a week or two at the most. Sometimes we're way really far ahead of it, and sometimes it's like I need it in 2 days.
And then you have to, and then you write out. Do you write the actual parts for the band, or is that you do like a head arrangement, or how does that work?
Usually, our composers will like write a demo up with like vocals and some whatever they feel like gets the point across, like in Logic or Pro Tools or whatever. And sometimes it's just guitar, sometimes it's just piano, sometimes it's a whole pop thing. And then they give it to us, and then I have a guy who works for me. His name's Joe Feidler. He's a jazz trombone player. He arranges and orchestrates all the music for the band, writes out all the parts and gets that all together, and then the band goes and plays it. And we have this great band of like half theater dudes, half like our guitar player plays with Bruce Hornsby, like all kinds of weird, interesting fellers. And that's it. It's fun.
Sounds pretty cool. I'm still back at the going to school for saxophone part. Aren't you supposed to drop out of school and go and shoot dope? And
I know.
Isn't that the whole deal?
At that time, I think my parents would have really liked that. I guess I knew I always wanted to be involved in music from about like 10th or 11th grade. Like I went to this high school in Long Island that was all mostly jocks, like kids who played sports, and I played sports for most of my life. And then my junior year of high school, I was like, this is stupid. so I'm going to play the saxophone. So that was an interesting journey. But I like the saxophone, and then I figured out that you could like get girls by playing the saxophone, and then it made it even more fun, as
That's
it were.
a major incentive right there.
But like in high school, I was like the super geek, like what is that guy doing? And then in college, I was like, holy cow, I can get laid with the saxophone. Probably should continue along this path. And then And then, it just fell off the saxophone playing. But it was definitely a helper path to get me where I am now, for sure.
Do you play on at all on Sesame Street?
I don't. I did play once last year. We have an annual gala, and Michael Bublé was on the show, on this live performance we do. And we needed like a big band vibe, so I whipped out the saxophone for the first time in probably 10 years. Nice. And the also interesting part about this is the saxophone player, the reed player in the Sesame Street band, is my 4th grade music teacher.
Wow,
which is great. And so he and I were playing in a section with Michael Bublé at Cipriani's, and so that was a big head trip moment for me. But it's pretty cool.
Wow.
So what's your journey?
Funny, man. I played. It was just super organic. I played rock and roll in my 20s. I wasted my youth playing in a rock band called the Del Fuegos out of Boston. And the major thing about that for me was just that I lived. I was just bought into the lifestyle part of it all, way more than the music making part of it. And but I lived. So I'm just for that alone, man. I'm glad we didn't sell one more record than we did, or one more ticket, or anything. Because it was such a tool for destruction in my case. But I learned a lot, man. We worked with this guy Mitchell Froome, his first record was our first record, and then he went on to do Crowded House and Elvis Costello and Randy Newman and all these kind of heavyweights. And so we learned how to make records from him, and then I just stepped back. I just stepped as far back as I could because I was so beat down by the whole thing after 4 records and the touring and everything, and I had no idea why this was a good idea. I couldn't remember what was so exciting about it in the first place, why I thought this was something I should be doing. And because in the beginning it was such a social thing, and if people in little clubs in Boston, if people didn't dance, then it wasn't even a gig, that was how it was. Everybody in the room was a part of what was happening. And then we got more successful and the wall went up, and, we weren't connected to the audience at all. So when I stepped back, I listened to bluegrass and gospel and dance hall, things that were really connected to communities. And I thought, oh, that's what it is. It's social. And so I decided I would never do it again if I couldn't do it and have it be social, And so when my daughter was born, I was just trying to. I'd made a pop record, and it came out in 94, 95 or something, and somewhere in the 90s. And I at the same time I was thinking about all ages music because I grew up listening to Lead Belly and Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie, and I was trying to think about what I liked about that music and why that was good for me as a kid and what the modern day equivalent might be. And I thought I'd try and make it. So I was updating folk songs and just trying to make some, just a recording to give out to people in the neighborhood for Christmas, basically. And because I was seeing everybody was, they'd have a kid and they'd go to Tower Records and get some things off the rack and they'd bring them home and they were too commercial or too this or too that, or it was children's music and they wanted something they could all listen to. So then they'd just get out the Beatles records and then that's that, then everybody's listening to Beatles for the next 80 years, but I felt like there was some window where there was music that would help young people see the world, help introduce us to the mysteries of life, in some way. And so much of the Beatles music or whatever it is, it's about romantic love, sexual love, and that's just not part of a 3-year-old's experience, so there's another opportunity. And anyway, I tried to make it and made this cassette. Nobody cared about my solo record, and everybody wanted more copies of this cassette, so I just said, that's what I'm going to do, man. I'm just going to start a record company, and I'm only going to make music for young people, or I thought of it as all ages music, only going to make all ages music, and I'm going to do it on my terms, and it's going to be handmade, and I'll use whoever's around. If it's, amateurs or celebrities or whoever, we'll just do it that way, and we'll make it quick, and we'll make it cheap, and we'll make it artful and sophisticated and handmade and all that stuff, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
I've having been involved now in this field of children's music forever, it seems like ever. I have one fundamental question for you, which is this: I get CDs and I attend conferences of guys or women, people who have children, and then get inspired by having children, as did I, as did you, and you have this thing, and you want to entertain it and you want to see it smile, and so you're either shoving carrots up your nose or running around making loud noises, or in many people's cases they they pick up the guitar again. It's an excuse to go back to this thing.
Yeah, man.
And I think that's wonderful. The thing that I find interesting is that people think that they can turn that into some sort of commercial thing. So there's this rash of dudes who just had kids, or guys or people who just had kids, who then want to put out records. And so my fundamental question is there's about 3 of you guys that really make it work and are really at the top of this art form. It's you and a couple other people. And so my question was, how do you think that happened? Other than you make really good records, that's clear, but there's something else. I don't know what it is. I just always interests me, having gotten CDs every day from somewhere, and they want to write for Sesame Street, or they want to know how I got to where I am. And I'm a little bit different because I don't write songs for me, I don't make records of myself. I write songs for Sesame Street, and they own them, and it's a television show. It's a very different thing. But it's a very small number of people that make this work. So anyway, that was a long question. But
yeah, no, it's interesting, man. I know when I started out, there weren't that many people doing it, and the people that were doing it were doing what was called children's music. And Tom Chapin, Raffi, Ella Jenkins, who's always been great. But I was trying to think, I felt like I was part of this generation that wanted to have this shared experience with their kids. And so I was thinking about all ages music or family music. What's that going to be like? And, but I think for me, I think I mean, I don't know. I don't know why anybody gets the breaks and other people don't. I mean, I'm a white dude, so I know why that particular break is effective. I mean, here in America, the white dudes get all the access and all that. But, given that, like why one white dude over another white dude? I don't know. I don't know. There's good people out there, but I do know that for me, what was important was that I was going to try and make records that reflected my neighborhood or reflected, who was around. So it was important for me from the very beginning that they were somewhat like multiracial, multicultural to some degree, because that's the world we live in, and that was for me such a great thing after being in a rock band with 4 white dudes conquering the world so we thought, to be able to be in a group of men and women, multiracial men and women, it just felt like the whole thing got elevated because of just the fundamental structure of it. Just makes better music, makes a better atmosphere, better conversation, so all that stuff I think was, and it, I don't know, it just feels so different to me, and so I feel like for me, man, it was the people around me, I think if I did anything well or anything differently, it was that I was able to, it was the people that were invited to the party. It wasn't really me. It was just the guest list. Uh-huh. So I think there was that, that was probably the biggest part of it, for me. I don't know, but I just, and I also felt like the whole thing with rock and roll for me was just so self-serving, it's just always about me. Mm-hmm. It's like, what can I get out of this, and I thought, children's music, you can't do that. You got to think about, you got to want to be useful member of society. And so I tried to keep that in mind. And, however that unfolds, I don't know. But I just thought, man, the world's seen enough of, Dan Zanes trying to grab all he can grab.
You seem to talk about like the communal aspect of it all, which I think is interesting because like, at least for us at Sesame Street, we're always debating over, is the parent going to like this or is the kid going to like this? The goal being, of course, that both like it. Yeah. But I feel like I often, when composers ask me, like, how do I do this? The only recommendation I give them is not to write it like you're writing for a kid, but write it like you're writing a pop song or a folk song or whatever song. It may be lyrically driven towards a child, but in the end, it's all fucking music, So it's like this idea of like dumbing things down, as it were, for lack of a better term, for children, I think is so interesting. Also because at least my kids, like they listen to every pop star that's on the radio. It's not like they go for the stuff that's different. So anyway, I don't know. I'd always think about that. That's the question I get asked the most is what's the key to writing for kids? And I don't know. First of all, I don't know that there's a key. But
that's a good answer. Well, there isn't one.
Yeah. If anybody knows it out there, then give me a call. But I don't know. I never. Whenever when I sit down like to write something, do I go, oh, like what would my kids think? That being said, I do bring my kid. Do you ever do this? You bring your kids down and play that? Well, your daughter's 20. It's a little bit different. Well, I bring my kids down and make them listen to the thing, and I can tell almost immediately if they like it or not, because my youngest daughter will be like, nope, and just like walk away. She's a super tough critic. Whereas my older daughter, who's a little more forgiving, we'll just sort of sit there, and then it'll end. She'll let it end, and she'll be like, yeah, no, and then she'll walk away. So at least she listens to the whole song, which I find to be nice.
That's great, man. I used to do that with my daughter. Now my daughter, I can do things like sequencing with her. Oh, like, yeah. What do you think of the sequence of this record? or she'll take photos for me. So I still try and keep her in the mix, but it's like, come on, it's a family business. You benefit from this too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It seems like Sesame Street's such a proud tradition of that. That seemed like something I know I always loved about that. And Electric Company too. I was actually just a little bit old when Sesame Street came out, so Electric Company was the one that I could really focus on that. So, but it seems like that's such a proud tradition of being able to navigate the intergenerational thing. Mm-hmm. But that's built into the entire view, the philosophy of the show, to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's when you jump into something that is 40. We're going to season 46 or something. Yeah. with something that's like well older than I am, and has this, you know, tradition, like you said, and this list of things that have been uber successful for 46 years, you try to figure out like how you can fit into that and how you can make the music speak in a way to the kids of today and blah 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 blah, but still sort of paying homage to the past and the songwriters of the past. And like with Sesame Street, it's always like, it's like curriculum, you know, it's like you're trying to get like word parts and STEM learning and teaching and all this other stuff. And so it's always like writing songs that are about silent E's and transformer H's and things like I had to take grammar classes or like seminars to learn all this stuff again, because I was like, oh.
Yeah. So how much are you involved in the lyrical?
I'm not. That's the interesting thing about Sesame Street is all the lyrics are written by our script writers and all approved by the education department, the research department at Sesame Street. So I'm usually just handed a script or a page of lyrics and then just set them. That's 95% of the time, 5% of the time. Because to get like a song with lyrics vetted and it be okay for the kids and also teach and also do all the stuff that it needs to do, there's sort of like a certain, you know, kind of person that can do that. It's tough.
So you're Elton John.
Yes.
You get Bernie Taupin hands you the lyrics.
Elton John. Yeah, that's correct. I said that so effortlessly. Yes, I am. But yeah, it's setting a lot of stuff to music, and then but that being said, there's a lot of collaboration with the lyricists. Like all of the lyricists have been working there for 20 some odd years, and so they they know how it's done, but they're also open to like making the sound current and making the song rock just as hard as the lyrics rock, so that we can all teach and laugh and jump and dance, you know. So.
Wow, man. I was watching the Janelle Monae segment that Billboard did about her visit to Sesame Street. That part's got to be incredible.
Yeah, the celebrity writing thing is fun. Like I finally have settled into a thing with it where it's like, you know, it's the same thing as being called to write for their record. She just happened to be writing for Sesame Street, you know. So like Janelle Monae, I didn't talk to her. I got sent a page of lyrics. I've listened to Janelle Monae for years, and she's awesome. And so I was like, I can do this. And so I just wrote that tune, and it was just super easy. It was, you know. And then she listened. The all time, you know, the great experiences are when a celebrity comes onto Sesame Street and says something to the effect of, "Wow, this could be on my record," or "Wow, you really nailed it." And that we were just in LA last week, and Gwen Stefani was very much like that. She thought the song super nailed it. So that's always pretty cool. And also just to get to write in all those different styles, like, you know, Nick Jonas and Gwen Stefani and Janelle Monae and Will-I-Am and Bruno Mars and Ed Sheeran and all these people, you know, it's fun. And you get to say that you worked with them too, which is, you know, good fun. But
yeah, when I made my first family record, I was friends with Suzanne Vega and Sheryl Crow lived right around the corner, and so I invited them to sing on it. And then people were saying, when I was getting ready to make the second one, people would say, well, who are the guests going to be on this one? And then I thought, oh man, I'm kind of stuck with this thing. But it turns out to be, I mean, I imagine you're like I am, where, you know, if you're into music, you're fans of a lot of people. You know, you love a certain, you know, it's like a big handful of people that you just love. And so, you know, for me, that part's been getting to see, you know, thinking, oh, what if Philip Glass came in and just played a little pump organ? You know, what would that be like? And finding out that not only would it be okay, but he'd be up for it and he'll write the piece to attach to the end of the song, you know. Yeah. All that stuff it just gets to be, you just think, wow, how far can we go? What if we'll have lunch with the Five Blind Boys and then we'll just walk up into the living room and record.
Yeah. It's crazy, yeah. Just the kind of, at least for me, the kind of access that it gives you, and just to watch also how those people work. Like I was just in LA and at these very famous recording studios that you kind of hear about in fairy tales, and you go to them, you're like, holy shit. And then you watch just the way they make pop records these days, and the way people record stuff, and how they tune things, and how they mix things, and you're just sort of sitting there learning. And I learn something new every time I go to a weird, very expensive studio with a weird, very expensive celebrity. Every time.
Yeah, man. I feel like that's, you know, the times that I've gone in to do something for somebody else, I've learned so much about what it means to actually be a professional from these people. You know, like working with Lou Reed, they said, well, you don't have to worry about Lou. He'll be there on time. That's just his thing. He's always going to, whether he's cranky or not, that's another story, but he'll be there on time. And, just to see who shows up prepared, who doesn't, and then how you sort things out, or who wants to stay for the extra couple hours and work out, 2 and 3 more vocal parts, and then possibly play an instrument on it.
Right.
It's crazy. When Leela Downs came in, we just spent the day, the first part of the day was just hanging out.
Right.
And then, things just unfolded so slowly and naturally, and it's just fun.
Yeah, I just love it when you get these people that have all this notoriety and are these very famous people, but then when you sit down and you just become 2 musicians sitting at a table, you're just like any other person, any other people sitting around talking about music. You just happen to have this crazy batshit career, and I do what I do, but we're still speaking the same language, and we're still talking about music. And I've been impressed with a lot of celebrities who you see them in their world and their thing, and then they come in and they sing, and you're just like, holy shit, like I get it, it's like just you wouldn't think that they. You think sometimes you think that they're all show, and then they come in and they have this innate gift, and you're just it's amazing.
Right. That's why you're so successful.
It's not just your good looks; which are wonderful. It's that you can actually sing. That's great.
I did a duet with Carol Channing. We did "Hello, Dolly," and
of course,
yeah, man. Who's gonna pass up that chance?
Yeah, never.
And I went out with my daughter out to San Francisco, and we'd gone. It had taken months to set this up, and finally the morning came, and she showed up with her manager, who was also her 4th husband, and they had been sweethearts back in junior high school.
Whoa!
And it was just so beautiful. But she showed up. She wasn't sure if it was video or audio recording. So she was dressed up. Makeup had been done, hair and makeup. She was ready for anything. And later that day, going out to Northern California, above San Francisco, for a show that night, and it was just so moving to see this person embodies everything I love about showbiz and about the hard work part of it. There's nothing glamorous about what was happening that day, but she showed up and completely plugged into it, and I just thought, this is decades and decades of ups and downs too, and I think people bring the ups and downs with them a lot of times, and everybody's got them. You can't survive for that long and not have the peaks and valleys, and I feel like that informs so much of how a lot of these people put themselves into the music. Nothing's taken for granted at that stage, but I was so into it, man. At one point, she turned to her husband. She started hearing me sing, and she turned to her husband, and she said, "Harry, who he reminds me of?" And I'm kind of hanging on for this. She said, "Louis Armstrong." and then about 10 minutes later, she looks over. She goes, "Harry, who he reminds me of? Barry Manilow."
2 distinctly the same people. Louis Armstrong.
It's so great, man.
That's awesome. That's a cool
it's so moving.
Yeah. So I have a question. Dan, what are you working on now?
I'm trying to figure out the next step. I might do a record of Leadbelly's music for children, which he's kind of the template for everything that I do. I mean, it has been from the very, very beginning. And so I'm talking to the people at the Smithsonian about doing that, which would be pretty fun.
How does Leadbelly lend himself to kids?
Well, he knew, I think, about 500 tunes that he had in his head. And when he lived in New York, he did a lot of performing for young people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there's a record out on Folkways called Leadbelly Sings for Children, I think, something like that. And it's got everything, Skip to My Lou, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Rock Island Line. These are songs that he would do. And he would go down to Elizabeth Irwin High School, perform down there. So he had an emotional connection to young audiences, which is really intense.
That is intense.
Yeah. And, and he had the repertoire, and he had he knew a lot of the dances and the movement. I mean, all the stuff that we know now as part of the early childhood music education curriculum. He was doing all that as something for fun and for entertainment. And, so thinking about that, and, I don't know, I'm just I'm I listen to some of my older records and I think, well, I could never top this. Why would I even try? This is perfect.
Tiring. Yeah. Yeah. I thought about that too recently. I've been writing songs. Like, with Sesame Street also, it's like a minute and a half, 2 minutes long. Like, I haven't written a full-on song in 15 years. Like, I don't even know what that's like. Sometimes when I sit down to do it, I'm just like, I can't do that. I got like verse, chorus. That's pretty much it, But bridge, never bridge.
Do you write musicals though too? You did something with Jeffrey Sellers.
I did. I wrote a musical called Fly. It's like a newer, darker version of Peter Pan, and it was at the Dallas Theater Center like a year ago. And it's fun. Musical writing is, again, not something I ever had the idea of getting into, but it's super fun. I mean, it's like it definitely uses a different part of my brain, and it's like when you're writing narratively and trying to further a story and still trying to make a cool song at the same time, it's very weird. It's not like you're trying to make a catchy chorus. It's like you're trying to get the story from here to here. And so it's a really different part of my brain. And I have this weird thing where my wife also, we don't really like early musicals. Like the whole Stephen Sondheim catalog, like we're not really that into, and we go to them all. And we leave and we go, nah, what are we doing tomorrow? And we're not that into it. And so it's a very weird place for me to be in. Like, I respect it because it's really fucking hard. But it's not like the first thing I would listen to. Like, I go to see musicals all the time. But it's not like, I guess it's not like when I was a kid, I was like, musicals. Never was. That was really. But that being said, I think what I did with Fly, which was really cool, which I enjoyed, was sort of use like the whole Neverland people are all these women and they all drum. So it was like sort of using my West African drumming background to sort of populate the sound of this island. So it's all like these huge Brazilian drums and everybody on the stage plays and stuff. So it's that part was really cool for me.
Wow.
I at least got to do that. And I don't know what the future of that is, but we'll see.
Fill the day with memories, and I know they're gonna last. So catch that train. Oh, come on out and catch it. Catch that train. All right. Come on out.
It's like you and it's Ralph and it's like 3 or 4 other guys as far as my brain goes in the world of children's music. And like then there's like a second tier of other people, but it's like people who are hitting it and making it happen is a very small group of people.
Yeah, the thing about it that I feel like, I kind of think the whole thing's gonna, as an idea, might cave in on itself if it
like
doesn't.
Everything.
If it doesn't look more like the world we live in, if it continues to be such a crew of white dudes and and some women, but that idea that it's almost like the 1950s in a way, it is. It's really. I know there may be a cultural piece sometimes, that white families may be more used to this idea, but of children's music or family music. But I think, that's part of what when I tour. We always try and invite local youth groups to come and join us, especially if they're operating in traditions that we're not necessarily hitting. So it tends to, it's everything from West African drum and dance, tap dancers, Peruvian family bands, mariachi groups. I could just go on, Filipino string ensembles, whoever's around. And a lot of times these are groups that are working in the communities that don't get invited to perform in the, they're not invited necessarily to the performing arts venues that we'll be playing at. So the idea is it lifts the show up for starters. Just musically, there's a whole other thing that's happening. We'll step off and let them do their thing. Then we'll come back and we'll all jam together on a couple of songs. And, we've gotten really good at figuring out how we can, finding that intersection of a Puerto Rican bomba group and our music, or whatever the case may be. But it's South Sudanese refugees outside of Boston doing primarily vocal music. We can find a way that we can find a couple tunes where we can all sort of settle in, and it's I always think that's a nice thing for the audience to see too. How music will build these bridges. But part of it is access too. You know, I mean, like the doors open easily for me, and so if we can kind of hold the doors open for some of these other groups, then you know, I feel like that's in some small way. I hope that's a way that we can, and also maybe get people excited by what family music might look like, and just, you know, keep saying like, hey man, you can do this too, you know. And there's been some great spin-offs from my band. Father Goose, the Jamaican guy who's been with me since the very, very beginning. He's made a couple records that were really good. So that's, you know, family music from the West Indian perspective. And our fiddle player, Elanamoon Park, who's Korean American, made a record called Rabbit Days and Dumplings, which is family music from East Asia, which is really cool. And our guitar player, Sonia de los Santos, who's from Monterrey, Mexico, she's just about to put out a record, primarily in Spanish, from the Mexican perspective. So my groups, you know, they're doing their part.
Yeah.
but
I have a group.
You gotta get a group, man. It's fun. It's the best. But sports, you know, you're talking about playing sports, and it made me think, you know, because I used to be really into sports too, and I think there's such a correlation between what, you know, you got to play. You're on a team. You know, you're on a team, and just what that means. And playing in a band is like that. I think, you know, it's such a beautiful experience to have, working with others. It's just not. Sometimes I wonder what this whole, you know, culture of individualism that we have around us, you know, how much that really benefits us in the end. I sometimes think that, you know, maybe the culture of community is more. Well, I don't think. I know. For me, I know it's more important. You know, I do. I could sit around all day and be an individual, but I could be very unhappy and disconnected.
I was fine with Sesame Street at the times when you see it being affecting a community and being like we do a lot of outreach programs with military families and inner city families and wherever. And also the other thing about Sesame Street is that it's global, and that you know, you'll write a song one day, and then a week later it will be in East Asia, or it will be in, and people are asking to have it translated into like 40 different languages, and then you're like, holy shit. wow. You know, and so that part of it is like that aspect of it, and you have no, you know, when you're in your basement writing it too, and you have no idea where it's going to be a week from now, is a very strange feeling. But yeah, like the outreach stuff, like when we have this annual gala and they show movies of all the outreach programs that we've done, like incarcerated families and military families and all kinds, you know, and you realize that the impact you actually are having, because you forget, at least I do, when you're just like in the factory making widgets. That's my dad says, making widgets in the factory. You know, you don't, and you just, you know, the song goes out into the world and you don't know where it's going to go or who it's going to affect and how they're going to affect it. And then I'm sure you get this like fan letters and stuff like that. You like can't believe where your song has been and how it's affected someone. And there's stuff on YouTube of people singing your songs and stuff like that. I never like, and you know, ever thought that was a thing that would happen to me, you know. And it's that part of it is kind of just like, you can't, it's almost impossible to explain how that feels, you know, because that a song that you wrote could mean something that you had no intention of it meaning that thing to that person, you know. I always find that to be very like the most humbling thing that happens with this is, you know, my daughter's choir is singing whatever, can you send us the music? And we really like it, and she was having a tough time and listened to it, and now she's happy, or whatever it is. It's just very, that kind of shit is just, you can't make that stuff up, you know.
Yeah, man, it's so deep. It's true though, you know. If it's your job, you can forget what, you know. Music saved my life. I'm sure it saved yours too, man. Yeah, I know. It's sometimes it's easy to forget. I think that might be my favorite thing about the age of computers is just how quickly people can respond and say, you know, tell you these stories, and because those can kind of get me out of bed sometimes.
Yeah.
So how does it work? You write a tune and then it goes out to the different Sesame Streets around the world, and they plug, you know, they have lyric writers who will do translations. And
yeah, I think it depends on the song. Like the first year I got there, I wrote this song called "What I Am" with Will-I-Am, which was a huge tune, and it was it was really well received. And then we would just get emails from Mexico that they're translating it into Spanish, and then, you know, all other places. And you see videos of kids in Jamaica and kids in Europe dancing along to it. It's pretty, yeah, that kind of shit.
Wow. So do you feel compelled to stay on top of music, contemporary music, and or feel compelled, or do you like to?
I do. I was going to ask you that too, because people always ask me, what am I listening to? And I always say, on my way home, I either listen to CNN or I listen to comedy, because I don't know about you, but like I'm so in music all day long that like the pleasure aspect of it has sadly not been lost, but like I don't really listen to music other than when I'm working. And when I do, I'm listening all the time, but that's a very strange thing. But I, you know, because of my daughters and because of what my job is, I am sort of up on what's going on, not on like what's hip this week, but I pretty much know what's hip this month, I'd like to say, you know? And when I'm in the car with my daughters, they just want to listen to like the same 8 songs by the same 8 people, you know, and they love it. And they only want those songs. Right now it's like Bruno Mars, Uptown Funk, and Nick Jonas, and Ella Henderson, which is a great song, Ghost, that song's killer. But and some of them are amazing, and some of them are like, I can't listen to this anymore. They listen to that, and they listen to the cast recording of Aladdin. Those are the things that my kids listen to. That's it. It's deep. It's like deep, and they know all the words, and they're 2 and 4. And my wife can't stand it at this point. We're sort of over it, but yeah, I mean, you know, especially like when you're writing for one of these celebrities, like you got to get in their head and you got to know their music. So like, I just did this thing with Nick Jonas, and so I listened to a lot of Nick Jonas because that's what the gig was, you know. And it's fun, you know. You get this sort of like chameleon aspect of writing, like you had mentioned before. There's bluegrass, there's folk, and it's like you get to like write in those styles and stuff. That's the other really fun thing about Sesame Street. It's like any genre at any time. Like on a given day, we could go from like a bossa nova to a metal tune to a funk tune to a classical tune. It just, you know, and that's kind of, that part of it's really interesting because you're just always on your toes and you never really sink into like, at least we don't, like the Sesame Street sound, which is great. And we do it all the time, but like we also go in and out of these other places. So
yeah. Wow. That's got to be fun.
Yeah. And when you're like, you know, you got like distorted guitar 1 second and then like 4 mandolin parts and a banjo and then a guy playing accordion and then like, you know, the washboard or whatever the hell it is, you know, it's like on that, you know, you sort of leave work and you're like, well, that was not normal. That was great. I'm going home, you know. So.
Do you record mostly at the, are you on the lot? Where do you?
Sesame Street films at Kaufman Astoria, but we do all the audio, all the music recording on 5th Street in a basement. In a basement studio on 5th Street between 2nd and 3rd, and we've been doing it for years. We did all the electric company there too, and our drummer owns the ground floor and the studio, so he's there all the time, and so we can just it's easy access, and the studio sounds great, and it fits us just perfectly. Like we do the rhythm section in the morning for a couple hours, and we take a break, and then we do the horns in the afternoon, and then we put it all together.
Wow,
it's fun.
So how many days a week do you record?
Usually like once when we're in production. So we start filming actually on Monday, and we've been in the studio for the past 3 weeks filming the songs that we're going to be shooting, and then we film all the songs for the next 4 weeks. They do an episode a day at Sesame Street. So like, you know, the average TV show, they film an episode in like 3 months. We do an episode a day. And so,
why waste time?
Right, I know. We just hit it. And so we film the episode. We record the music, and then they shoot it all. And then I'm at the studio sort of making sure the vocals are cool and all this other stuff and making sure we're lip flapping correctly. Like that's a thing. And then they get cut and stuff, and then we go and we do all the underscoring afterwards. And then in the meantime, there's like other little, there's the street story, which is like that first 8 to 12 minutes of the show where the puppets and everything. And then there's all this other stuff. There's Cookie Monster gets lost in different movies, and there's Grover does this, Super Grover does this. There's all these other sort of insert-y things that we do, and that's it. It's fun.
Wow. Sounds like so. How many songs do you do in the course of a month?
It depends. Like we were filming 18 episodes starting on Monday for the next 3 weeks or so, or 4 weeks actually. And there's probably, I didn't write them all, but there's probably 24, 25 songs in there somewhere. Some episodes have 4 songs, but again, like a song could be 30 seconds or it could be a minute and a half, but it's never longer than a minute and a half. So it's verse, chorus, out. There's no like guitar solos, and there's no bridges at all.
You tried to add, but the numbers came out wrong. You tried to sing, but you didn't know the whole song. You tried to cook, but the food it didn't taste right. You tried to dunk, but you didn't get enough hype. You didn't do it right now, but keep trying. You learn how. You just didn't get it yet, but you'll get it soon, I bet. That's the power of a yet. Yet. That's the power of a yet.
Sounds good to have a job.
Sometimes, sometimes no. Sometimes you want more of a job. Sometimes you don't. I mean, I don't know about you, but my priorities changed a lot when I had kids. It wasn't. I just got focused on having something that was regular, because guys in our line of work, it's hard to have something that's regular.
Yeah.
And so living like that when other people are depending on you is hard. I always thought.
Yeah, it's funny because when my daughter was 5 and 6, I started touring at that point, touring more. And so I'd be gone almost every weekend once things really picked up. Mm-hmm. And it was, I missed out on a lot looking back on it. Mm-hmm. But I was, but I'd be back and I'd, kind of read to her every night and do all these things regularly through the week. But she was in school, so definitely did miss out on quite a bit. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, it was so exciting that something was working. Right. That was like, right. I'm doing this.
Yeah. My wife and I had been talking about that a lot. She had been home with our kids for like the last 3 years or 3.5 years, and then got this amazing job and has started working like in the city full time, but in the city like 3 days a week. And so just changes things, the dynamics change. And so I'm like, take them to school in the morning, work from home, record songs in the basement, pick them up. They hang out with the babies. It's just like a weird, like switcheroo, So, but it works.
Yeah, it's hard to. I kept just trying to gauge everything, make sure everybody was happy. Like, I know I'm not around, but is everybody happy? Okay. And, I'm not sure if they were. I think they were happy. And then sometimes I got to be friendly with Carl Sandburg's daughter, and I did a record based on songs from a songbook that songs he had compiled and put out in a songbook. And he was such an intense dude. And I said, well, he was gone all the time. He was always traveling. And how was that? And she said, oh, we were happy to get rid of him. He was so cranky when he was around. We had to be quiet so he could write. And I thought, oh, that might be me too. I'm kind of cranky when I'm around. The thing that was crazy for me was I felt like we had some years, and I got divorced when my daughter was 13. So, which is not a good thing for a family music artist to do. It's better to just stay happily married for the rest of your life. That would be by far the best scenario. But it didn't work out that way, But and we had a few years where things were difficult, and it's been really nice to feel like as adults, that we've been able to reconnect, to on some planes that I didn't know existed, as far as communication goes, and adult experiences that I had were of some value to her, and vice versa, that we would be able to share experiences that we had and identify, as adults, we're all broken in one way or another, and to be able to find those things and talk about them, and it's a kind of a spiritual thing.
To be honest, I had the same experience. My parents got divorced when it was like 8 years ago, when I was 26 or something. And it's that same thing. It's that you start to know your parents separately, and then know them as friends as opposed to parents.
Yeah.
And then you find out very different sides of them, which is I find to be fascinating. I mean, like, oh, that's who you are. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice, So I agree with you. I mean, like, downer or not, it was a good thing for us. I mean, it's just sort of opened up the experience and opened up the lines of communication for sure that had like been sort of dormant for many, many years.
Jump up, day is breaking, jump up, let's get shaking. I know you're lying down, but jump up and we'll dance around. Jump up, the bells are ringing and I hear friends are singing. Oh yeah, it's a crazy sound. jump up and we'll dance around.
So when my first daughter was starting watching Sesame Street, and by the way, having kids who watch Sesame Street is both a blessing and a curse, because for maybe 6 months you're the shit because you go to work with Cookie Monster, and then like sometime after that you're like, my dad's a loser who writes songs for Cookie Monster. You know, so it goes. But anyway, one of the first things that came up, and I've now learned plays all the time, is Dan, is you playing on a stoop in Brooklyn. The tune is Jump Up, and it's awesome. And you know what's interesting about it, now that I'm thinking about it, is that all our episodes sort of have an arc to them, but it kind of fits into every episode, and apparently is playing in every episode, and is a great song. And the best part I think about it, and what my kids loved about it, was just it's you and your daughter in the beginning. I think, is that your daughter? Yeah.
Yep.
And then all these people come join, and you're having the best fucking time that anyone could ever have. And my kids would, like, they get up and they dance because they're just, that the excitement is there. You know, it's such a simple idea, and the song is fantastic. And so anyway. When did that happen, and what's that about?
That's cool. I appreciate hearing that. That thing's been running for over 10 years.
Just talk about community, by the way. I mean, we've been talking about community forever. Like, that's the ultimate visual representation of community. It's like, here comes the bass player, here comes the thing, and now we're all playing a thing together. That's great.
And it's so simple, right?
Oh, so simple.
But no, that was a thrill for me. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've actually tried to get on the program and go to the street, but it doesn't matter because that video just runs and runs and runs.
You've made your mark with that for sure.
Yeah, and it was cool for me too, because when I was thinking about how am I going to do this and how do I want it, there were so few examples of a deliberately multicultural, multiracial approach to children's entertainment, and Sesame Street was the one. That was the one. And so when I read the book, which I can't remember what it's called, but it came out a few years ago about Sesame Street, and they're talking about the climate in the '60s when they're saying, look, this is important. Kids have to look at the screen and see themselves. That if they don't, certain things are going to be, or if that's all they see, certain things are being reinforced, and just the importance of it, and the beauty of it too. It's not just important. That doesn't sound like fun. It's just fun too. And so for me to be on Sesame Street, and that to have a video that's been running for this long with them is great, because it's a part of a tradition that was really important for me to learn from, and for me to know that, I'm, not only is thinking about this, it's, to be thinking about this approach into, because, it's always been important for me that my band, when kids come to the shows, they look up on stage, they can see themselves up there. It's just to know that at the time when Sesame Street was being developed, that was something that it actually had resistance. A lot of people didn't believe in it. A lot of people thought it was not important and not necessary, and a lot of extra work, and who really cares? And so the ground that they broke, for me was it was critical. It was critical. So. Yeah, man, Sesame Street. I mean, every month I'll get a call from a new parent saying, "I just saw you." I moved to a new neighborhood, and a woman drove down the street yesterday and stopped as I was about to cross the street. She stopped. She said, "You're on TV, aren't you? You're on Sesame Street." And I said, "Yeah." She said, awesome. "Okay, good. See you."
That's awesome.
Yeah,
it's a great song. The whole thing just worked, and I don't, maybe that's why it continues to air 100 times. It's good, It's funny, they use archival material, but there's like 5 or 6 things that have really withstood the test of time over the last 10 years, and that's one of them. It's great. It's awesome.
Wow, it's a good thing for me, man. You never know. I was just, I was surrounded by great people. Mm-hmm. And that was the interesting thing for me, though, was going up there to have the initial meetings. And I think I made 2 or 3 CDs at that point, maybe just 2. And they looked over all the songs, and they were saying, well, these songs are cool, but there's not really enough curriculum in these songs for us. And I had no idea what they were talking about. I didn't know.
It's like my whole life. Yeah.
It was crazy, And then they said, well, this one is good because there's movement. But then I developed an early childhood music education program with the Brooklyn Conservatory a couple years ago, and all of a sudden, then it made all the sense in the world. You gotta have curriculum, man. That's the whole deal.
If you're trying to teach with music, I mean, you gotta start somewhere. Yeah.
It's good, but to see, I like the way, there's always such a good amount of humor to it on Sesame Street, which I think is, I guess when stuff loses me sometimes, if I don't quite connect with, not that I know it all or listen to a lot of it these days, but, I think a lot of times the children's music, it does kind of lose me if the humor isn't there. I think that's a kind of a crucial element.
Or it takes itself too seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
like, or it's too complex. I find that's happened a couple times where songs that I've been writing or my kids have seen, and they just goes over their head, and then you're lost because it just they could be watching anything, or listening to anything, but if it goes over their head too far, and then here's something we should talk about, like how simple do you get? How sing-songy do you get? How do you make the melody that how do you make your melody stick in a kid's head? I find that to be one of the most fascinating things these days, is like what sticks in my head and why what sticks in my kids' heads and why. Like my one daughter remembers every lyric to everything and will just start like singing melodies in the corner just because that's how she's wired, and she can just remember melodies. And then is it because she's heard it 1,000 times, which is probable, or is it that it's actually that great of, I don't know. But when I first started writing music, I wasn't like a melody guy. I was just trying to figure out how the chords went along, and then throwing a melody in there that pretty much just went from root to root to root. And now all I do is think about melody. It's all melody all the time,
Wow.
So, which is weird because then when you think about it, like it's not like most pop songs are harmonically complex. If you look at, I was just writing an arrangement of like the ABCs. It's just like 1s and 4s and 5s. It's not that complex. It's pretty simple, and you're like, oh shit, that's how simple it is. and then it's just all about melody. It's all about what what you can latch into. I don't know.
Yeah, man, I think there's so much. It seems like some of the songs that I wrote along the way. I might write 5 songs tops for each of our records, because there's so many old songs to bring into it that I always feel like that's important. But sometimes if I'm really tired and I write something and just kind of quickly and not think about it and not over bake it, turns out to be so much better. There's so much room on the side of simplicity that I wasn't aware of before. I just so naturally like to overcomplicate things, and I think once my brain gets in there, that's the beginning of the end. But I remember when I would go into my daughter's kindergarten class and play for them, and one time I ran out of songs and they wanted more, and I remembered this one that I had learned as a kid called "Pay Me My Money Down," which is a work song, and I learned it through the Georgia Sea Island Singers, and it's basically it's a work song, so it's call and response. It's pay me, you owe me, pay me my money down, pay me or go to jail, pay me my money down. Every other line is pay me my money down from beginning to end. And then thought I heard the captain say, pay me my money down. Tomorrow is our sailing day. Pay me my money down. They just loved it. It had nothing to do with their experience at all. And they just loved it. And they latched on to that line, pay me my money down, and they could sing along within 20 seconds. Yeah. And it was kind of subversive because it had to do with money, it was crazy. It told me so much, though. But the music out of the Georgia Sea Islands is, I think, inspirational in that way. Bessie Jones and all that stuff, so simple but grounded in tradition. But I think that sometimes the call and response, is.
We talk about call and response a lot at Sesame Street and how effective it is, and just getting a kid not only to repeating the same thing to them so they latch onto it, but having them come back with it, and the interactivity of it all, I think we've been doing that a lot with Sesame Street, like stomp your feet and wave your arms and clap and do all this stuff, so that the object being that the kid gets up off the couch and engages with the television, but in a way that they're dancing along with it, as opposed to just sitting there.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, which is hard. I mean, like, when's the last time you were watching television, something happened, you're like, I want to get up. Maybe it was like when someone great was elected to, like, presidency or something, you know, there was some great political thing, and you're like, yes, and you stand up, but, like, that's it. Like, you know, I dance with my kids, but even now, it's like later on at night, and I'm tired, and I'm like, I don't want to get up, you know, and so, but that was the thing we did recently, was like try to get kids up, get kids up out of their chair and dancing, which is hard because you also don't have the live element of it, which is something that you live in, which I don't. Like, you know, performing live, I haven't done in that kind of way in a while, and it's much easier to get people off their asses to dance when you're right next to them, as opposed to trying to communicate through the television.
Yeah, well, that's an achievement though. It's such a good thing. You know, it is such a good thing to get up and move. I feel like I wish there had been more of an emphasis on that when I was a kid. The idea of dancing as just a part of everyday life. Mm-hmm. You know, I think maybe that's a bit cultural too. I grew up in New Hampshire, not known as the freestyle dance capital of the world. So I had to kind of learn it all in adulthood.
Live free or die, or dance.
Yeah, but that makes so much sense, man. You know, and I was thinking too about just simplicity and did you hear the new Bob Dylan record?
No.
Shadows in the Night. It's all songs that were made popular by Frank Sinatra.
Oh, wow.
And so you're listening to some of those, like Autumn Leaves or Some Enchanted Evening, and realize you could take the lyrics to those songs, I mean, a quarter of a page. There's almost nothing there, and yet it's everything. You know, it's the poetry is so deep. There's not a wasted word. You know, the economy of it all is incredible.
But those tunes are also harmonically kind of significant. Like Autumn Leaves, for example, is not like a 4-chord thing. It's like there's a few more chords in it than that.
Yeah.
But yet in those days, again, as sophisticated as the harmony was, the melody dun, 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 is so simple that it's just like, you know, like immediately in your head.
Yeah, it's good to. It's nice to hear. Check that record out if you're at all a Bob Dylan fan. Shadows in the Night, I think. Mm. But it's what a crazy idea, and his singing is so good. You know, it's to hear the perspective of an older man thinking, you know, singing something like Autumn Leaves is deep. But, you know, he's clearly inside the music. Mm-hmm.
You can understand him? Because the last time I saw Bob Dylan, which was many years ago, I couldn't really understand him. I love him, but I couldn't understand him.
You can understand every word.
That's good.
The arrangements are delicate. You know, they're just barely there. It's like wind.
Yeah, like that last Johnny Cash record, which was so great. The one that Rick Rubin produced was the same way. It was just about like his crazy, haunting voice, and really whatever else was going on really didn't matter. It could have been a totally a cappella record, you know.
Yep. No, it's fun to see. It's fun to see artists getting that amount of freedom and being at a point in their lives when they can make any decision they want and follow through on it, and what they end up deciding to do and what's meaningful at that point. It's great, man. It's nice to think about. It just makes me think about, what does it even mean to be an artist? You know, what's the deal?
No, I think you're right. I talk about that a lot with my wife, even, and with people who are interested, which aren't many. But
I'm interested, Bill.
Thank you, Dan. Somebody's interested. And all you listeners out there,
anyone who's hung on this long,
yeah, right. But about like you know, for me, there's the artist, there's being an artist and being involved in an art, as it were, like music, and then there's my side of it is a little different because there's a corporate aspect to it and there's a production aspect to it. It's not just me writing songs and making records. And there are days where I wish it was, but it's not. Like I like to think I'm my own boss, but I'm not. And, you know, I have deadlines and things I have to do. And there's, you know, there are a lot of people listening to my songs and have to approve them before they go anywhere, you know, and stuff like that. And it's a very different, it's that constant battle. Like when your art becomes a job and when your job becomes an art. Like in the beginning, you're like, holy cow, someone's paying me to write music. And then later on, you're like, holy cow, I don't want your input anymore. I just want to write music, you know? And so it's just, so I go back and forth about that all the time, because in the same way, I don't really listen to music other than during the day. I've never made up my own record of own music. And furthermore, and this is really crazy, I've never written a song for myself ever in my life.
Really?
Not once.
Wow.
And people ask me, like, you had daughters. Like, weren't you inspired? I'm like, yeah, I was. But then I had to go to work the next day and write a song for, like, Cookie Monster. So I don't. It's just the honest truth. Like, I mean, I wrote songs kind of for myself when I was in college, but I was, like, in a Paul Simon, Grace Landy band. And it was just, like, about smoking pot and hanging, as you do.
Sure.
And so, but I've never I've never even wanted to. Well, that's not true. Maybe I've wanted to. My wife the other day was like, why don't you write a record for yourself? And I was like, yeah, I can do that. Like, it never even crossed my mind. I don't know. I guess it's when your business is your music and your music is your business. And it's just a very weird line to walk.
Yeah. I remember after I left my rock and roll band before the family stuff started, I had some years where I just didn't know what to do, and through thankfully through my ex-wife was a director of TV commercials, and so I was able to do some music for TV commercials, and I remember instrumental music, and I remember that feeling, sitting in a room of people. And you bring something in and everybody's weighing in on it. You think, wait a minute, you can't weigh in. You don't know anything about music.
Yeah.
But of course they know a lot more about TV commercials than I do, so they should be weighing in.
Right. Sort of have to figure out a way to communicate.
Yeah. No, we were speaking different languages a lot of the time. And I was, trying to speak the language of the artist that felt like it was already perfect.
Right. I do a lot of like commercials and other documentary sort of things, and when the people start like communicating with me in colors, like they're like, it needs to be like more yellow and less green, and I'm like, I quit. Or like, can I fire myself because I just can't put up with this anymore? And then you mix the bass down and you send it back and I'm like, oh, okay, done. And you're like, oh, okay, that's what it was. That's the yellow part. I get it. That's the color that makes sense there. All the time.
Well, it seems like anybody who's listened to this podcast for this long deserves some celebrity stories.
And we have good ones. Yeah. You used to live around the corner from Sheryl Crow, and apparently one time you had an experience with Lou Reed.
So, all right, I'll do the Lou Reed one if you'll do one of yours.
Okay, cool. Your turn. Go ahead.
So we were going to do, through my agent at the time, Linda Brumbach, she said, she worked with Laurie Anderson. She said, we could see if Lou wants to do a song. Do you have one in mind? And I said, how about What a Wonderful World, the Louis Armstrong tune? So Linda, I don't know how she did, but she set it up. And I said, can you just tell Lou's office, we got to make sure that he knows he's not coming to a studio. He's just coming to our my co-producer's house. It's in a little apartment. And they said, no problem. So the doorbell rings. It's the big day. We've recorded the track. Lou's going to come in and sing on it. And I run down to answer the door. And I say, hey, Lou, it's Dan Zanes. And he said, yeah, Lou Reed, can we make this fast? And so then I'm already just kind of sweating through my clothes, and we're walking up the stairs trying to make small talk. And he gets in, he goes, yeah, I need the phone. I just want to call for a car. And he shows up promptly at 2, calls for a car to pick him up at 2:15. So now I'm losing my mind. And but what happened was he put on the headphones, and he requested a Shure SM58. So for people who don't know, that's the most common microphone on the planet to sing into. Every crappy
like
rock, every crappy rock club in the world has
like 12 of them.
And that's the one he wanted to sing into. And so we had it ready for him. His back was hurting. He sat on the couch. He had forgotten his glasses. We had to tape the lyrics about 8 feet out from him so he could read them. The whole thing, I didn't know, and then he puts on the headphones, and I'm losing my mind because he's so great, and here he is in this little room with us, and he puts on the headphones and he starts singing to the track, and immediately it was obvious to me that he didn't know the song. And that's not a 2-chord song, and I'm just going, what's going to happen, man? This is a complete disaster. And he's cranky. And then he looks over at me and he says, who's playing this guitar? And I said, it's me. And he nods and he goes, it's really good. It was unbelievable.
Like, yes.
And then, so he goes, all right, let's do it again. And he said, if you don't get it in 2 takes with me, you're not going to get it. And he doesn't even know the tune. So he goes into it. And then halfway through, I realized something. Not only did he know the tune, but he had absolutely clear sense in his mind of what he was doing and what he was doing with the song. And it was a jazz vocal. You know, he was coming at it from an entirely different direction, and it was perfect. And you know, so we did it again. He goes, "Oh, you want?" You know, then he's loosening up and he's sounding great, and he's going, "Are those beatboxers?" I go, "Yeah," and he goes, "Yeah, it's good." You know, it's like, and then he starts talking about gear with Rob, the engineer, and then once the gear talk starts, then it's, you know, we're laughing and hugging, and that was it. By the end, you know, he was there for an hour, and it was you know, probably one of the best things that I feel like we ever did. And I saw him at a party at Annie Leibovitz's, you know, later that year, and I said, "Hey man, I just want to thank you for that again, and I realized something about you." I said, "You're a jazz singer, man." And he said, "Hey, you ever need me for one of these projects, you just let me know." And he gave me a big hug.
That's awesome. I love that. That's a serious Lou Reed story.
Oh man. What do you got?
The first tune I ever wrote for Sesame Street was this tune called "What I Am," and I wrote it with this guy Chris Jackson, and he and I have collaborated a lot over the years. Anyway, I had this studio on Orchard Street in the basement, and it always flooded, and I hated it, but I needed a place to work. So anyway, I was walking out of it, or I don't know what I was doing, and I called Chris, and I left a message on his voicemail, and it was like, "If what I am is what's in me, then something, 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 na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na." And like 20 minutes later, he called me back, and he's like, "I got it." And he sent it to me. And at the time, we knew it was for Will-I-Am. And the idea was what I am for Will-I-Am. And it had this bridge, it had this whole thing, and we were super psyched about it, and it was great. And then, so we sent it to him, and we didn't hear from him for a while, and then he likes it. He's going to produce it himself, because apparently Will-I-Am's a very picky dude. Now I know, but he was so okay. So we're going to meet him at the studio, which was our studio on 5th Street. So he rolls up in. First he calls me, and he calls me Mr. Sherman, which I thought was really funny. He's like, "Hello, Mr. Sherman." I was like, "Hello, Mr. I Am." I didn't even know what to call him. I was like, "Hi." He's like, "What are we doing?" I was like, "Well, the lyricist had to change a few lyrics. We just need to change some stuff around." He's like, "All right, I'll be there in 5 minutes." At like 4 Suburbans pull up, and he comes out, and this is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. He had a plastic Michael Jackson pendant, circa like off the wall era, like hanging around his neck.
Nice.
Like Flavor Flav, but like a Michael Jackson pendant.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. How do you pull that off? Really? And so he comes into our studio, and he's looking around at our gear, and he's like, "Yeah, why don't we just go to my place, because I have all my compression settings and everything." I was like, "All right, where's your place?" And he's like, "Wang Chung on Varick Street." And I was like, "Okay, I think that's what it's called." Is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called. Anyway, it's like the Wu-Tang like studio where Wu-Tang made all the records and all these great hip hop records, and it's on Varick Street on like the 15th floor. So we get into one of Will-I-Am's humongous Suburbans and drive to Varick Street and get out. And so he's in a studio, which it's like a 88 channel board, and then there's like a Mac and a Neumann and him, and then there's a live room big enough for an orchestra, but no one's using it, and it's just him and like his assistants and anything. So we spend the next 3 or 4 hours talking about music, and he re-records the vocals, and he produces all his own vocals. And what he did that I loved is that every time he did a line, he would stop and then play it on these speakers that were like the size of 2 bookcases, as loud as humanly possible. And I was like, holy, and I was just sitting there, and Chris, my friend Chris, we were just there, and we were just like, wow. And like he would stop and like take phone calls from Jan Wenner. So he'd be like, "Hey Jan, yeah, okay," and they'd walk over there, and we'd be like, "Yes, that's Jan Wenner on the phone." Yeah, like crazy. Anyway, and he finishes it, and he's super nice, and he was just like explaining his philosophy on music, and that he really liked the song. He actually cut out my bridge, which I loved. He cut it out and just made it sort of the same thing. And it was great. And he came to film it, and he's like has this, was having a love affair with Grover, as everybody does, and it was a very surreal day. And then the song went to win an Emmy. It was super great, and that was that. But yeah, that was one of the wild days. Although they're becoming fast and furious. I was in the studio with One Direction. I was in the studio with Bruno Mars, like, you know, like these crazy people is just, it's nuts.
So how was Janelle Monae? Was she fun to work with?
She was great. She recorded at her own place in Atlanta. So I talked to her on the phone and she did it, and then she just sent it to me. And that's been happening more and more these days, is like people like Bruno Mars recorded his on his tour bus, you know, and then like Juanes recorded his in the basement of Madison Square Garden because that's where he was, like crazy stuff like that. There were people just like a microphone and like a laptop and they just do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I was just in LA and I was at like East West Studios and Henson Studios, like the world famous-y, like Sinatra and the Tijuana Brass recorded here, and you're like, huh? You know, you're just like, you're like whoa. And the studio game in LA is just a whole different thing. It's really mind-boggling. But yeah.
And nothing's gonna bring me down. Never gonna stop, gotta go. Because I know I'll keep getting stronger. And what I am is thoughtful. And what I am is musical. And what I am is smart. And what I am is brave. And what I am is helpful. And what I am is special. There's nothing I can't achieve because in myself I believe in.
That's it for this episode of the Talkhouse Music Podcast. I'm Michael Azarad, Editor-in-Chief of the Talkhouse. Thanks to our producer-engineer, Elia Einhorn. For more Talkhouse Music podcasts, and for lots of great writing about music by some excellent musicians, by all means visit thetalkhouse.com/music.